in 2021, sort of at the end of COVID, when we were coming out of that, my daughter got COVID, and I assumed I would get it from her, but which I did very mildly. But I've been vaccinated, but because of that, I was looking at my throat a lot to see if I could see any, I don't know, COVID-y things in there, and I noticed that my right tonsil was very swollen, and it was odd. It wasn't particularly painful, but it was very swollen. I had a lot of tonsillitis when I was younger, so I kind of was used to tonsil issues. And because it wasn't painful and I wasn't ill from it, I just assumed it was related to some weird COVID side effect. I tried to find out about this, but I couldn't. At the time, the GPs were still not doing face-to-face, so I had a online consultation, or telephone consultation, when I sent some pictures, and they didn't think it was anything particularly concerning, and got me to take some antibiotics. They did nothing, and after a month I thought I better follow this up. I did. I had another telephone consultation with a GP who again didn't sort of seem particularly concerned, but I was getting a little bit concerned. I didn't think of anything major, but it was odd. And so for the third time, I had got a GP's appointment, and I made quite a fuss about it this time. I said I needed to see someone from ENT, and the GP thought it might be something called quinsy, which I didn't think it was, because again, quinsy causes you to get fevers and ill. But she said to go immediately to A&E, because quinsy itself can be quite dangerous if it bursts. So off I went to A&E, and from then on it sort of turned into you know, something completely unexpected. They were a bit circumspect, but they said they would need to do a biopsy. As soon as they said they need to do a biopsy, obviously I think, oh right, they're talking about cancer. Well, that's really odd. That led to them deciding they were going to do a full tonsillectomy, and they would do the biopsy once they had done that. So it was all kind of booked in. Everything happens quite quickly, and there's all sorts going on, all kinds of tests and visits to the hospital and checks. And so I was, so this started in August 2021. A month later, I had my tonsils out. A few days after I'd had my tonsils out, I had been told I had to isolate because of infection, but they asked me to, about 4 days afterwards, they asked me to come in for a meeting at the ENT department, which I thought was a bit strange, because I thought I was supposed to be isolating. When I got there and walked in, and there was sort of a room full of people, I thought, oh dear, I don't like the look of this. And they said, yeah, you have something called tonsil cancer, which I'd never heard of. And they explained that it was stage 2, which it hadn't spread beyond the sort of immediate surround of the tonsil, and that it would be treated in a very standard way, which was obviously I'd had surgery, and then I would have radiotherapy, and basically from then it just, you know, becomes you're on a bit of a treadmill of you know, various treatments and preparations, and there is a lot of preparation procedures and tests and things.
And how did you handle that initial diagnosis? You said when you heard the word biopsy, you started to join the dots up, but what was the kind of, like, the emotional state of hearing that news?
I mean, look, anyone who knows me would never call me hugely positive. I'm probably a glass half empty person, to be truthful, but for some reason, I don't know why, it didn't especially bother me, even though, you know, at that stage, I didn't know the details of the cancer. As it turned out, it was HPV positive, and that's, you know, apparently become quite common with especially tonsil cancer, and that actually means it's very treatable generally. It's susceptible to radiotherapy, as I understand it. So even before I knew that, for some reason I didn't feel too threatened by it, perhaps because I didn't feel ill or anything. There was just a lump, I'm not sure, but I was fairly sanguine about the whole thing, and in a way that was then confirmed when they explained to me, after the biopsy results came back, and they explained to me that it's an HPV positive cancer, and they explained that that has good outcomes with treatment. So I never felt sort of, I was concerned because all the treatments and stuff didn't sound very pleasant, but I never felt particularly upset or bothered by it. And as I think is the case, it's the people around you who are probably a little bit more concerned, partly because they're not getting all the information that you're getting, because I was going to all these, appointments with various departments, and, you pick up more and more information. So I fairly quickly felt, this was going to be treatable. It was just not going to be a pleasant treatment.
Okay, and so just leading on from that, can you talk us through the treatment that you had and your experiences around it, around that initial treatment?
Yeah, okay. So, I think you obviously have a lot of blood tests and things like that are fairly standard, but the major things I had, and apparently this varies a lot from where you get your treatments, but I had to have what's called a stomach rig, which is they put in a tube into your stomach with the expectation that once the radiotherapy really kicks in, you're not going to be able to swallow because of the effects of the sort of burning effects and things like that. So they want to be able to put something directly into your stomach so you can feed yourself through a tube. They did want to do this beforehand, so it's all ready and set up and there's no issues, and they don't want to wait until you're the situation where you can't eat. They're very concerned about weight loss, partly because when you're going to get your radiotherapy treatment, they take all these very precise measurements, and if you're suddenly much smaller, those measurements might be thrown out. So I had that stomach rig put in, which was a pretty weird experience. You're conscious whilst they do it, and it's it's quite forceful to get this thing through your stomach wall. And unfortunately, mine got infected. The site got infected and was pretty much infected throughout my treatment. So I had a lot of issues with that, and antibiotics and things like that. But it was also, a lot of these things I kind of dealt with a bit of humor. It felt a little bit like, the Alien, the scene where John Hurt and the alien bursts out and had this sort of, I know that's going to sound a bit off-putting, but I had this sort of dangly thing, and I was quite often, revealing it to friends and just being a bit puerile about it all, which kind of helped deal with it. The other thing that you have a load of dental stuff, and radiotherapy can affect your jaw and teeth, so they're very concerned about that. So I went to have a consultation with the sort of medical dental side, and fortunately I didn't have to have any teeth removed, because that is something that can happen, and my teeth aren't great as it is, so I was very worried about that, and I was quite relieved when I didn't have to have any out. But it is a long-term issue. I have to really be careful and try and look after my teeth as much as possible. And obviously they give you all that information. And there's lots of things like you have to go and get, the way that the treatment worked in my case was you basically, you lie on a bed thing, and you have this mask put over your head and neck. And this is, it's a kind of plastic lattice thing, so that it's not, I didn't find it particularly claustrophobic, but I could see it could be, but it's but you have to have it made up. So you go to this special department in the sort of basement of the hospital, where the technicians get a piece of flat plastic stuff and they mold it to your shape, and so that's your mask for your treatment, and that kind of keeps you in place. What else? There's just lots of things like that happen before the treatment starts, and so it's very full on, and it really uses up your time. And I found it kind of quite good in a way. You don't have a lot of time to dwell on things, and it's all very novel, all these things. So in a way, I found it quite interesting. I think it's a bit perverse, but I did find it all sort of from a popular science point of view. It was kind of fascinating, all the things that happen and go on. And I tried. It's so much information. That's the only thing I found, perhaps in hindsight. I wish I tried to take notes and things, but I did, but I wish I had done in even more detail and asked a lot more questions. The trouble is a lot of the questions I know now, but I didn't know them then. So, which is a bit annoying, I think.
And that would have helped you
helped
get
with
to
loads
grips
of
with your
stuff.
treatment.
If I knew then what I know now, it wouldn't have made any difference to the treatment or anything, I don't think, but it just would have been better for me, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think somehow to get as much information about that specific, your specific type of cancer and the treatment involved. But I think tonsil cancer is, it's fairly rare, so it's like there's not a huge amount of information. And I was kind of wary about going online to get information. I did a bit, but only tried to get it from official sites, but there wasn't a huge amount of detailed information. And I'm the sort of person who, I would go for as much detail. And I think I can cope with a bit of scientific information, whereas maybe some people just prefer not to have that and just get on with it. But
I guess everyone's different, aren't they? And just for anyone watching, when you're sort of talking about the mask you had fitted, that was specifically for your radiotherapy treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah.
So what was the radiotherapy treatment like for you when you got started with it?
Okay, cold, because you have to sort of lie down on it. Everything feels like it's cold, and it was winter, so but I mean, it's fairly straightforward. Basically, I would turn up, you're in a waiting area. It was still sort of COVID regs, so everyone was socially distanced and in masks. You get called in, you go and change from your clothes into a sort of gown. And you need to take off anything like a watch or jewelry and things, anything metallic, obviously. And then you go through into the room where the radiotherapy machines are. It's quite a big space. There's a sort of medical type, I don't know what you call it. It's not a bed, is it? It's like a hard, what do you think?
Like a table?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, table for lying on. I don't know. There's obviously a term for it, but and I know there's different kinds of radiotherapy machine. I can't actually remember the exact name of the one I had, but it's a big, quite impressive looking bit of kit, and you lie on your back. The radiotherapists and the technicians who were all, very reassuring, and like I asked them to take pictures, and they took lots of pictures for me on my phone, and they're obviously really busy. There's a lot of people waiting, but they didn't sort of rush you or anything. They're very good.
Can I just ask, did you want photos so that you could share them with friends and family, or what was the kind of?
I just wanted some pictures on my phone. I did have everything. I just wanted to be able to sort of, have a record of my of my sort of journey, not in great detail, but just something like that. And they're obviously used to that because they know how to, the pictures were good enough. So obviously done it before. But I mean, it is a bit weird, especially at first, because, you're lying on your back. Literally, this thing is fixed along the sides to the thing that you're lying on, because it's important that you're very still. And as I understand it, it's a kind of CT, you get a CT scan at first, so it's a sort of combination. And so you lie there, then they'll leave the room and go behind a glass window, and they'll talk to you, and they'll tell you, right, we're going to start now, just breathe deeply and stay still, whatever. And then the machine sort of whirs and clicks and makes some strange noises whilst the CT scan, you get a little laser thing that you see moving. And then there's the actual radiotherapy bit is very short. I mean, I can't actually remember, but it's, a couple of minutes, if that. And I think that was right. But I know the whole procedure is pretty quick. You're only in there for, 10 to 20 minutes at most. Sometimes they have to reset the calibrations and things. And then that's it. And certainly, so I had 30 sessions, which again is fairly standard treatment for tonsil cancer treatment, as I understand it. And it didn't feel, I had no sensation or anything probably until about the 4th week. when it started to, I started to feel it around my neck, and it slowly started. It's very much like a really bad sunburn on the outside, and especially that sort of. So it was 6 weeks in total. I would say the last 2 weeks and the 2 weeks after it had finished, I had a very sore, very red neck, sort of spread down to here. But it was no worse than a really bad sunburn. You wouldn't normally get sort of sunburn just here, but it didn't feel any worse than that. I didn't particularly need any painkillers. It was sore, but and they offer you them. They encourage you to take them, because I think that that would help. But it wasn't as bad as I was expecting that bit to be, and the outside healed quite quickly.
Yes.
The inside, probably a similar kind of time. Around about the 4th week, I began to notice a build-up of mucus, very thick mucus, a lot of quite sore, quite a lot of difficulty in swallowing. Taste and texture began to change, and I probably stopped eating around about the 4th or 5th week. I just couldn't. I mean, it was a mixture of difficulty in swallowing, a really unpleasant taste. So I thought you'd lose your sense of taste, but actually what happened with me is things began to taste really unpleasant, and textures began to feel food tasted like wallpaper paste, very unpleasant and very hard to swallow, just difficulty in swallowing and painful to swallow. So I started to use a tube. I was given all these sort of high protein mixtures, and I mean, I had this huge bag of sort of these special syringes and all sorts of things. You have to have a bit of a procedure. So sort of 3 times a day you use I guess it would have been purified water, so you squeeze that in to clean everything out. You then fill up a big syringe with these high protein liquids. You squeeze one of those in, you wash it out again. You have to keep it clean, obviously. And then any medication, so antibiotics that I was taking throughout would go in through this. You have as I remember, there were 2 different, one was food and one was for medicines, 2 little endings. So it's 1 tube with 3 endings, as I remember, 1 for food, 1 for medication, and I think the other one was just there as a backup or something. So I had to start using that, and obviously you have to be quite diligent about that, because you've got to keep it hygienic, and you've got to try and keep your weight up. You've got to. The radiotherapy is quite a tough treatment, and you need to have as much strength as you can to fight it, I guess. The treatment finishes after 6 weeks, and they said, look, the actual side effects, immediate ones, are going to sort of get worse probably for the next couple of weeks, and then those will ease a bit, but then there are more medium and long-term ones afterwards. But I did find that my neck healed quite quickly, and kind of that was it really as far as the treatment. I didn't have anything. I didn't have any chemo. I didn't need chemo. It was all done by surgery and radiotherapy.
Yeah. And how was that period where you were starting to get those side effects? Okay. How did you handle that?
So once it had finished and I'd sort of stopped going to the hospital on a daily basis, you still go quite regularly at that point. But the biggest thing was just discomfort, because there was a massive build-up of mucus in my throat. I mean, I was literally sleeping on a pillow with a towel folded, because I was just it was literally just pouring out. It was terrible in terms of being able to sleep. I mean, it really, really difficult to sleep. and it was just very uncomfortable and very unpleasant. And my friend came to see me, and it was coming up to Christmas. They said, would you like a Christmas present? I said, yeah, a sort of giant box of tissues. I mean, I just got through sort of tons and tons of tissues and stuff like that. I mean, it's all very, gunky and sort of a bit yucky, all of that side of things. It's pretty
And
unpleasant.
did you feel prepared for that? Did you feel like you were ready for
It's
that
kind of
to happen,
impossible,
or?
I think, to be prepared, because you just have no idea. And the thing is what they keep emphasizing is everyone's different. So the side effects will affect people differently. And from what I've read, there are people that have had very different sort of side effects. I mean, it's pretty common because mucus is your body's reaction to that sort of thing. It's trying to soothe your burns and things. So I guess everyone gets that to some degree, and probably quite a lot, I imagine. But yeah, I couldn't have envisaged quite how extreme that would have been, how discomforting that would have been. And I found that with most of the medium to long-term effects, although I was most of them being told about, actually envisaging in advance what they were going to be like. It's quite hard to imagine.
And well, I'd really like to, if you're up for it, to talk about medium and late effects. But was there anything around that time when you first started to experience side effects? And I'm particularly thinking of anyone watching this who might be in a similar situation, that was helpful, anything that sort of supported you?
There were, I mean, there were lots of things were suggested, some of which, and I tried lots of them, and some which helped and some which weren't. So, try them all. But I bought a little kind of steamer online, and that helped. It's just, you put water in it, steam comes out, and you breathe it in, and it's just a vaporizer, really. And it just helped sort of, even if it wasn't for very long, but it did help clear some of the mucus and stuff. So that was useful. Just making, I mean, I was sort of fortunate in that I could just take time out of work and just make myself at home as comfortable as possible. That's all you can really do in that sort of, especially in that sort of first month after treatment finishes, where you're spending most of your time just sort of clearing your this sort of mucus and saliva and stuff. I didn't find anything that was gonna, there wasn't anything that was going to absolutely deal with that. But I mean, if there's any pain, they'll make sure you've got pain relief. And but most of that is it's just knowing that sort of acute bit isn't going to be forever. So I've made myself as comfortable as possible. Actually, to be honest, going for walks does help, because what I found was if I'm static, I'd get much more of a build up. If I go for a walk, and even if didn't particularly want to, I'd make myself go for even a short walk. That definitely helped sort of clear my airways a bit. So I think keeping active as much as possible was useful. I'd say the burns healed quite quickly, but there are creams you can get, lots of sort of recommendations, but you have to get the right ones. Some of them, and especially if you're using them during radiotherapy, you have to check. They'll recommend things anyway, but some of them don't work very well with the radiotherapy. But afterwards, I got a very thick, almost a Vaseline type one, which I found quite good. I also sometimes, when I went for a walk, whilst it was still very sore, would wrap it just very gently. They give you these sort of neck kind of things, but I just put some cling film around it, which just sort of stopped any rubbing and stuff. Once that had healed, it was really just a question of coping with difficulty in swallowing. And I obviously I had the tube, which was there, so I knew I used that I didn't miss meals and things. I used that, but I tried to you know, start drinking water and things like that. Obviously you have to put a lot of water through the tube. You've got to keep hydrated. That's very important. And yeah, basically just trying to keep myself comfortable, listening to a lot of music, watching stuff on TV, just things like that. And then also, trying to keep upright a bit as well.
That sounds like really
fairly common sense, isn't it, really? And
well,
you will be given a load of advice, and it's like, I think it's really worthwhile following it, you know, because I think as soon as you start being able to do the physiotherapy, which they'll give you these exercises. See, I must admit, I kind of, for some reason, I wouldn't say I completely neglected it, but it didn't, there was so much stuff going on that it didn't become a sort of regular priority. And that's perhaps a bit of a mistake. I don't know. There sort of seems to be, jury seems to be a bit out about how effective it all is. But obviously, you know, you want to keep all your muscles and things sort of, you know, as loose as possible, and so you don't want them to stiffen up too much. They will stiffen up, but you want to do so. As soon as they give you physio, I would try and do it. That's my advice. It's a bit like, don't do as I do, do as I say. But you know, I've certainly done more sort of, so I'm a couple of years out. I certainly started to do it, but you know, perhaps a little bit later than I should have.
I think there's nothing like hearing it from someone who's actually been through it. I think that's the value, isn't it? So you touched on the fact that you've had medium and long-term effects and that they've been very impactful on you. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably lots of small things that you know I don't even remember anymore. One of them just before sort of was a medium term was I sort of noticed that I had, you know, my neck was all puffy and stuff, and I thought, what the hell's that? And this was one that actually hadn't, one of them, you know, so many of them, but this one wasn't one I'd been told about as a possibility, but it's lymphedema, which fortunately in my case wasn't too bad. And there was a great YouTube video with a treatment where you basically just use your hands just to sort of rub the fluid. So lymphedema is where you get a build-up of lymph fluid in your sort of neck, because it doesn't drain away because of sort of the damage that the radiotherapy has done. In my case, obviously it was temporary because, you know, I did all these it's only like a 10-minute sort of, you know, rubbing exercise, and it faded away, and that really definitely helped. So that was just a small temporary thing, but it was a bit, what the hell is this at first? I suddenly had this sort of, you know, completely different neck shape. But that can affect people apparently in different ways and worsen depending on all sorts. So but after that, I think that the thing that's been I was told that the saliva glands might be damaged, it might be permanent, they might come back. There's no way of sort of really knowing because everyone's different. And the thing I've really noticed, and the thing that has impacted me more than anything, is the sort of dry mouth. And you know, this is very, very common because I go on a sort of a group where there's maybe up to 40 people online at once, and pretty much everyone has had different types of head and neck cancer, and pretty much everyone has dry mouth issues, and they vary. And as I understand it, again, it's damage to the saliva glands or maybe even the ducts, and it can be better or worse. You can just be more or less unlucky. But I get saliva, it's very thick and sticky, and this has really, really affected my ability to eat and enjoy food. And you know, it's amazing how much food plays a part in, you know, one's life. I mean, we know how obsessed we are in this world about all that sort of stuff, but it really, you know, I just couldn't believe it. You really notice how everything is based around, oh, we're meeting for this, and this is the food, and we're planning, you know. And the thing I've really found, and it still isn't really hugely improved, is just that food is just, at best, it's kind of a bit bland. It's actually because my muscles aren't as strong. They're not too bad, but they are a little bit weak. But you know, swallowing is quite difficult. The dry mouth makes swallowing extremely difficult. And taste and texture for a lot of things, you know, they can be actually still really unpleasant. There's a lot of things I just cannot eat anymore. Just as an example, I would love more than anything just to have a cold beer on a hot evening. And beer and wine taste really vile, and they just don't seem to have got any better. It's a bit like drinking a pint of just soluble paracetamol, soluble aspirin. I mean, it's just bitter and watery.
Yeah.
And a lot of things have got a really strong sort of salty, bittery taste, especially things that have citrus. So a lot of fruits like that, things like, I don't know, soy sauce. I mean, I used to love cooking sort of, you know, Asian food, and mostly I can't eat that now at all because things like soy sauce or fish sauce or a lot of spices just taste very bitter and unpleasant. And that's yeah, I find that's the thing. Whereas I felt with my treatment, it was just something to get through, and I knew it was sort of, you know, it was going to be for a certain amount of time. This feels like it's probably permanent. I don't really know, because a lot of this stuff can take years to resolve, or partially resolve, or get a bit better. But the thing that's really hit me and made me pretty depressed at times is the whole issue around food and eating. It's almost like, you know, even when I think about, oh, okay, I wouldn't mind going on holiday, and then you think how much going on holiday and food is so linked, and it surprised me how it sort of puts me off a bit. I guess it's, you know, a lot of that's about trying to think of it in a, I don't know, it's not exactly in a positive way, but I mean, I guess I've taken that quite badly, you know, that side of it. It's, you know, whereas I was able to cope with all the treatment by sort of laughing at it or being interested in it, I found this a big struggle. And and a bit like I was saying earlier, I could have never anticipated that it would be quite so impactful. I mean, it really has been life-changing. You know, it's almost like it was a small L or something. You know, I mean, I can imagine things that would change your life in a far more kind of dramatic and impactful way. But for me, it has been huge. It's taken out one of the sort of great pleasures of life, you know.
Yeah, that's sort of where my mind was going in terms of it. And as you say, it's so part of our culture and our enjoyment, isn't it? And I suppose as well, not knowing if there's an end point to that or if it'll ever change must be very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I don't suppose it's ever going to really, I can't imagine now, 2 years out, there's going to be a dramatic change, but there might be some change, because I had, okay, so I had a follow-up. They stick a camera up your nose and down your throat. Sorry if someone's about to start this, but they have a look, and what they're looking for tumors and things, and they always say, oh yes, that all looks great. So the last time I went, I said, well, look, what do you mean when you say that looks great? What do you actually mean by that? And said, well, there's no, you know, new growth, there's no nothing. Oh, okay, so it looks like a normal throat. Oh no, it doesn't look a normal throat. It looks like someone who's had radiotherapy. So it's, you know, but when I, you know, the doctor says, when I say it all looks great, I mean, you got no tumors. Okay, that's fine. That's kind of always my expectation. But it was interesting to know that it doesn't look like a normal throat. It looks like a throat that's had radiotherapy. And, you know, that's something that can take, apparently can be permanent, can take, or it can resolve, or can resolve to agree. I mean, you know, there's no knowing, but you know, the fact that I have a lot of discomfort still, that kind of makes sense. And it was kind of almost reassuring to be told that, because, you know, it doesn't feel nice. So, and now I know it shouldn't, you know, if it was completely normal in every sense, you know. So I think sometimes with doctors and things, you have to pin them down a bit on what they mean exactly. And also, I mean, personally, I'd prefer if they were, you know, they didn't use euphemisms, they were really straight up. So it's worthwhile pushing them a little bit. If you want to, you know, get more information, just keep pushing a bit in a pleasant way.
Sure.
You know, I think that they have to make a judgment about what they say to people. They can't, you know, there'll be some people who, you know, will get, you know, very upset about things, and or just, I don't know, people are all different, as we said. So you have to make your own decision about how much information you want to take on board and how far you're going to push that. But yeah, some things I've realized sort of, since quite a long time since, is that, actually, yeah, it would have been better if I had been a bit more sort of demanding of information at an earlier stage. None of which would have changed, I think, anything that's happened, but
No.
perhaps it's just, you want to be in control as much as you can. It's very much feels a bit like a top-down sort of business, medicine. You've got these sort of experts at the top, and they say this is how it will be. And I think the more passive you are in accepting that, that's either going to might make it easier for you, but also I think it's makes you a little bit less feeling like you've got a bit of say and control in your treatment, which I think is really important. I think it's a sort of culture that's changing, but it's quite slow to change. In some areas of medicine, it's changed a lot, that sort of thing. I know, because I've worked in the field of HIV, that in that sort of area, the whole activists, their sort of demand that they're equal partners in their treatment has really changed the whole way that that's done. And I think that's spreading in slowly into other areas, and cancer treatments being one of them. And so I think, it's good to be as informed as you possibly can, and to push for information. That's well, if I had my time again, that's what I would be, much more demanding of information, just so I felt a bit more like it wasn't just a subject of something. I was actually a partner in my treatment. Feels important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you recommend to someone who maybe did feel a bit overwhelmed by the appointments, the treatment, the amount of information?
Yeah.
Have you got any thoughts on how they can sort of do that sort of taking ownership and pushing for more answers?
Yeah, because it is difficult, because not only that, I know that some people don't want to have a whole load of information. And so I think I think you need to have a really good think about that, what you actually want, because that might suit a lot of people, just, to let someone else take control. I mean, it just depends. So I think at the beginning, it's worth trying to think about that, if you can sort of be rational and have a good thought and talk. Hopefully you'll get a sort of like the nurse, a cancer specialist nurse, who'll be like your liaison person, and I would talk to them as much as possible at the beginning about that kind of those kind of issues, and probably to write everything down, and write down what you think is going to happen, sort of in the order that it's going to happen, and then from that, perhaps look at questions. I can only think that just getting as good information as much good information as you can is important. And I really avoided anything like social media for information, just because there may be some great stuff there, but I think it's so easy to get misinformation, not necessarily disinformation, but misinformation that can, send you down all sorts of wrong tracks. There's some very good books around. I read an extremely good book that just weirdly, I always think it's a bit funny, because it was a book I bought years before, and I don't know why I bought it, and I'd never even opened it, and it was literally under my bed like a harbinger, waiting for me to open it. And literally I had the receipt in there, and I bought it 10 years earlier, and that was a brilliant book. It wasn't specifically about my cancer, but it was about cancer in general. And it's just it's a well-known, I don't know if I can
Yeah, please share. Yeah,
so it's called The Emperor of All Maladies. It's quite well known, but it is a superb book, and it's about sort of the history of treatment, basically. And I don't know, I found reading that to be I mean, it didn't give me any information about my circumstances, but it just was just to know something about what cancer is, and about how mutations and things work, and how genes and mutations were, I mean, I've probably forgotten it all now, but I found that a really good thing to do. So reading as much as possible, information, good information, perhaps,
trusted information.
yeah. But like I say, if that's the sort of person you are in a way, you know, and lots of questions. Get a notebook, write it down, and don't be sort of worried about asking another question and getting the doctors or whoever you're seeing, technicians, to explain, you know, clearly. I mean, they're obviously, sometimes they're very rushed and all the rest of it, but they won't mind if you know, and if at the end of the day they've really got to see the next person, they will politely move you on. But I wouldn't ever, you know, I think you have to sort of feel like it's your treatment, it's your body, it's your illness, you know, you've got to be as much in control of at least the information flow as possible.
And from the professionals I've spoken to, they certainly, like, they're really keen for people to ask questions and to know more and to feel empowered in that way. So absolutely. I imagine, as you say, it's a two-way street, but they're not, from what you're saying, they're not necessarily going to force information on you.
They don't know you, and they don't know what kind of person you are and how you're going to react to, you know, I don't know, for example, just the side effects, you know, the whole stomach, obviously they told me, you know, what it was going to be like, but it is pretty gruesome. And so they don't know whether it's going to really freak you out or whether I'm going to be like someone like me and laugh and say, oh, I'm like John Hurt from The Alien, you know, or something like that. Yeah. So I think, yeah, you have to be, you know, politely sort of forceful about, if you know, about understanding. If someone explains something to you and you don't understand it, just ask them to explain it in a different way. But yeah, and everyone involved in my treatment on the medical side, from the porters right to the consultants, were fantastic. And you know, receptionists don't have a great reputation, but they were absolutely brilliant, all of them. So you know, that was good. That's really helpful. Really helped. The fact that everyone was just, you know, I know it's sort of almost like a cliche with the NHS and stuff, but they really were. The empathy levels were sort of off the scale. Yeah, so that was great.
And actually, that reminded me to ask you, Marcus, you said you had 30 treatments over about 6 weeks. So was it every weekday you were going in?
Yeah, every weekday. Yeah. And so with that, so I live in London. I had to get from my house station, from the station I'd get an overground train to central London and then walk. So I made sure I walked from the overground station, central London, to the hospital. It's about 15 minute walk each way. And you know, that like I was saying earlier, that about you know, sort of clearing some of the gunk and stuff, and that was, at least that was a sort of brisk walk, you know. That was a little bit of exercise, and that really helped. Just that journey, you know, because beforehand they were sort of, you know, saying, well, you might be too ill or you might have to get a taxi, and you know, it wasn't ever that bad for me. You know, it was almost like everything was here, but the rest of my body was fairly okay. I mean, I didn't feel fantastic, you know, but it wasn't as debilitating in that sense as I wasn't led to believe, but I was, you know, told it could have been like that.
And it didn't get that far for you.
No, I think the worst it got was probably actually right at the end of the treatment, when the sort of radiotherapy is still sort of doing its thing. I think there were a couple of weeks after that where I felt pretty like I just wanted to lie down. But even then, you know, it wasn't physically, it wasn't too awful in that sense. It was, you know, everything felt, and even now, you know, my body feels fine. I mean, I have lost a lot of weight, I should say. I mean, I've managed to stabilize my weight, and I do eat, but I still eat these high protein things just to make sure I don't lose any weight. But that's because I just find eating a chore rather than a pleasure. So it's kind of hard, you know, and I can't just go and eat this and this and snack and stuff, because it's just like, you know. but you know, well, okay, about not even a year after the treatment, we went on holiday, went to Greece, and my daughter and I did one of those. You get these massive gorges in Greece where people go for walks, and we did this, you know, whole day of walking, like 8-10 hours, you know, including these sort of huge climbs up. My body felt fine after, you know, after sort of 6 months afterwards. You know, like I say, you know, it didn't sort of it's affected this area, and it still does. And right now, I mean, I feel like I've got a mouthful of cotton wool. You know, it's not a pleasant sort of sensation, and it is there all the time, and it's kind of tormenting. I'm getting a bit more used to it. It's less tormenting than it was sort of 3 or 4 months ago. You get used to it, but I haven't found any real solutions for that. But the rest of me, you know, is okay. And there are some positives, because, you know, I quite like, but like, you know, sort of teenager, I quite like being skinny. So, you know, there you go. The negative is all my clothes had to be, I mean, everything I've got is massive on me, and I've had to buy new things, which is nice as well. But, you know, I'm not going to have a worry about being overweight, that's for sure. It's one thing I can not worry about in the future.
Is there anything you feel has kind of helped you mentally come to terms, not just with the side effects and the late effects, but just with what you've been through?
That needs a bit of thinking about, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've said it already, really, but I think that right from the very beginning, it never felt to me like an existential battle, any of those terms that get used with cancer. And as I sort of said earlier, I mean, I'm not sure quite why, even before I knew the actual facts of it, I never felt massively concerned. I think perhaps because it just, to me, my particular cancer, to me just seemed like a lump in my throat. It wasn't painful, and it wasn't sort of, you know, it didn't affect the rest of my body. And I know that's not the case with other cancers. You know, I think, as we were talking about before, I don't think the term cancer is very useful in some ways, because it's encompasses such a vast range of different illnesses, really, and effects. And I think in my case, all my problems have stemmed not from the cancer, really, or this is what it feels like. It's, you know, it's come from the effects of the treatment. And unfortunately, at the moment, you know, that's the most effective or the only treatment for certain types of cancer. So, you know, maybe in the future, I know that there's been research and sort of suggestions of doing things, you know, in the future, you know, and especially with new sort of new treatments that are coming up. So maybe, you know, at some stage they won't need to use such a sort of heavy treatment. And I know from reading some research papers that the biggest concerns are about the sort of the impact of the radiotherapy on people. So I don't know. It's a when you have a throat cancer, because it's a delicate part of the body, radiotherapy is a tough treatment, and unfortunately has side effects. And it's kind of hard to say how, you know, because we're all individuals. As I said before, I'm not necessarily the most sort of upbeat person in general, but I felt, you know, I could cope with the actual treatments. I found this bit much harder, the long-term effects. So it's kind of hard to think how you deal with that. Perhaps, you know, like with sort of things like food, it's just trying to engage with food as much as you can. So I have more recently started to cook again in a way that I used to, not as much, but I mean, even if it's not for me, you know, for family and stuff. And, you know, I've been encouraged to try different things, and I think I do that rather than just sort of giving up and just sort of, you know, I'm just going to live on, you know, I don't know, milk and eggs or something. Trying to eat different things and keep trying to do that. And what I tend to find is I'll find something that I like, and then I'll eat it like crazy for a bit until I'm absolutely bored stiff of it, and then I'll hopefully find something else. So, you know, food. So I would say that right now the big issues are food and a sort of sense of discomfort. And the discomfort, you know, there are lots of things you can try with that. Is, you know, but I just tend to drink a lot of water. There are pastils and all sorts, and some people absolutely swear by those. And other sometimes they you know, help. But like I said earlier, doing the physio right from the first start and sticking to it is good. I think that's because it's, I guess doing any exercise in any situation is always a good thing. I mean, I don't go to the gym or anything, but I'm about sort of 15 minutes from my nearest sort of shops and things of any sort of, so I do that not every day, but most days I'll walk there and back, and I'll walk fast. So it's not huge, but it's sort of, you know, helps just to do that. And you know, obviously on other times I'll do more, but I mean everyday sort of stuff, just to try and keep moving around, I guess, is helpful. Anything that can distract you is going to be helpful. Music was really important for me throughout that.
Yeah.
Just listened to a lot of music, rediscovered old music, and, you know, stuff like that. But I just found that's psychologically very helpful for me. So I would have thought, in a way, it's distractions. And if you're sort of person who's got lots of hobbies, I think that's going to help because, you know, okay, my hobby in many ways is food, so I kind of, you know, need something else. But if you've got some, I think it's just, you know, you just need to sort of have other areas of your life to, because it's not something that it stops you from, you know, there's discomfort, but it's not, you know, it doesn't actually, it's just, I don't know, it doesn't stop you from doing anything. It's not sort of so, it's not, you know, I don't know how to put it. It's not such a big thing that it's going to stop you from living your life, but you just have to live your life with a little bit of, you know, unpleasantness. Hopefully, you know, hopefully anyway. I mean, I don't know. I know people who just sort of, everything's completely recovered. So, you know, but I think it's very common to have that sort of, you know, saliva issues, lack of saliva and things like that. Look after your teeth. That's the other thing. I'm very diligent about that.
Yeah.
Because who would have thought that saliva is such a important fluid? I mean, I never knew this. I just thought it was something there for, I don't know, kids to spit at bus stops or something. But it turns out it's got all kinds of incredible benefits.
Yeah.
So you do have to bear that in mind. But and I guess perhaps addressing all those things is a good way of dealing mentally.
And I think you really hit on something there, that yes, lots of people don't have side effects or late effects, but a lot of people do. And I think it's just reassuring for people to realize that actually they're not alone, and
there
are other people out there dealing with it. And we talk about radiotherapy as a life-saving treatment. It's hugely positive. It can be curative, etc., etc. But as you say, and I'm really glad you've said it, it's also really tough on you as well. And
I've got a love-hate relationship with the sort of, you know, the thought
yeah,
about it.
yeah. And I think it's really important that we can kind of have both those views and those conversations. Yes, the good, but also the not so good.
Yeah.
Is there anything I should have asked you, or anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't cover?
No, I think that's, I mean, no doubt once we stop, I'll think of all sorts of things, but I mean, I think that, okay, so just from something you just said, I think I said earlier, I felt very depressed about the whole issue with, you know, discomfort and food and all of that. And I joined an online charity, sort of, I don't know what you call them, group, and that meets regularly. And the very first time that I went online, and there were all these people who were all in the same boat as me. I mean, I was almost in tears because it was just such a strong sensation to discover all these people who were experiencing similar issues. Because one of the frustrating things is trying to explain to friends and family what you're going through. It's kind of difficult, and as much as people want to be helpful and well-meaning, it really pissed me off when people are, oh, can you eat this, or how's that, constantly. And you know,
Yeah.
and it's hard. It's hard to kind of explain exactly what is going on, because it's not like, oh, I've got no taste at all. It's this sort of weird, you know, one thing might, you know, there's no logic or no consistency to that. But it's constantly trying to explain what you're going through, and then suddenly you're with a group of people who you don't need to explain because they've been there and they understand it. And so I would definitely join, you know, a group of some sort. There's lots. Don't keep things to yourself at all. I think that's really important.
Really important. Yeah.
And obviously Macmillan is the sort of go-to, who will then perhaps, you know, recommend other groups. But I would start doing something like that as soon as possible. I think you really need to talk as much as possible. And there is a lot of support during the treatment. Just, you know, as I said earlier, with the CNS nurse, and, you know, anyone in the hospital will talk to you, you know.
Yeah. What was the group you attended, Marcus? Would you like to sort of give them a shout out?
The Swallows, who are well known, but and you know, obviously you can find them online, and they're you know, they're great. And obviously COVID's affected sort of face-to-face meetings, so I've only been doing online ones with them, but I mean, there's people from all around the world on those, so that's kind of interesting. And there's a lot of advice and talks from people about all kinds of aspects, sort of experts and stuff. And hopefully the face-to-face meetings will come back soon as well, so that you can have a meeting in your area. But yeah, I would absolutely say that's really important to do.
Marcus, thank you so much for chatting with me. And if you do think of anything else, we'll have to get you to come back and do a blog for us, or part 2.
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks so much.